It is a torturous logic to use the tragic results of segregation as an argument for the continuation of it.
2 years before his assassination, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. visited the University of Miami, delivering a speech to 1,200 students and faculty denouncing the causes of social and economic inequality. For more on Dr. King's lasting legacy and his impact on Florida and South Florida in particular, we're joined by Dr. Tameka Hobbs, an author, historian, and professor at Florida Memorial University. Thank you so much for being here on this historic
Thanks for the
day.
invitation. Great to be here.
So tell us about Dr. King's connection to South Florida, because he definitely had a presence here.
Yes, I think when you look at his time that he spent in South Florida, you can divide it into two areas. On the one hand, he came as a speaker and an organizer. We see him in 1958 coming to kick off a voter registration campaign at Greater Bethel AME Church in Overtown. A few months later, he came and addressed the American Jewish Congress in town. We see him later in 1966 establishing a chapter of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference that he organized here in South Florida. On the other hand, Miami was also a place where he vacationed. It was a place for him to take a respite from his very busy and demanding schedule. It was also a place where he can hide. Of course, doing the very important and dangerous work that he was involved in, there were constantly threats against his life. And so when he came, the stories are that he kind of hopped around between different hotels, from the Sir John to the Mary Elizabeth, most famously the historic Hampton House Museum now that's been restored. And the story goes that he actually gave an early version of his I Have a Dream speech to people who were staying there, so they got to see that. He was also very close friends with Dr. Edwin Shirley and his family, and he would take him out to Virginia Key Beach, the segregated beach. He would take him deep sea fishing. It was a place where he could go to relax and take a little break from the demanding work that he was a part of.
And there were certainly serious issues here in South Florida. You mentioned Virginia Key Beach. The beaches were segregated. African Americans couldn't be on Miami Beach after a certain time unless they had an ID card or they had a reason to be there. We know what happened with Muhammad Ali when he lived here as Cassius Clay. What was his message when he came to Miami?
I think his message was always consistent. On the one hand, he was definitely working to end segregation in all its forms, increasing opportunity for people of color. But towards the end of his life, he had picked up with this theme of economic justice, that we needed to have higher wages, more or less employment discrimination. And he was really speaking at one point, there was a press conference that he gave in 1966 about the danger of economic competition between Cubans who are now coming to Miami and African Americans, and he thought that they should not be pitted against each other, but they should instead work together. And so that was a very consistent message that you'll see him a few years later kicking off his Poor People's Campaign, and that's something that I think people really should dig in with. We spent a very lonely year, that last year of his life. He was really ostracized, not only by the Johnson administration, but by a number of more conservative leaders after he came out against the Vietnam War. And he worked really almost single-handedly to push forward with this Poor People's Campaign that was not just about black people. It was a truly interracial movement. It involved poor whites, Chicanos, Native Americans, all of the dispossessed people in this country. He thought that there was enough wealth here that we could uplift them. And still, when we look 50 years later, there remains a lot of work to be done on that front.
So here we are on this milestone day, 50 years since his death. How close are we to the fulfillment of Dr. King's dream?
I have to say, today has been a day for me that's really been somber, not only because of the tragic way that Martin Luther King was killed, but the fact that we really have, there's a lot of stagnation, I think, around the core issues that he was involved in. When you look at the reports about school integration, there's as much segregation now as there was 40 years ago. When you look at economic inequality, we still see masses of people who are still struggling today, wealth disparities, even in terms of the temperature of our social conversation around race today. It's incredibly disheartening. And I think what my analysis is that we've been really satisfied with the symbols of advancement and really haven't done the tough work. Laws, I think that Lyndon Johnson famously said that you can change the law, but you can't change a man's heart. I think the work that we need to do moving forward really involves our hearts.
The struggle continues.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tameka Hobbs from Florida Memorial University.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hobbs.